Battlefield is heading back to the modern era with Battlefield 2042, the next installment in DICE's storied first-person shooter franchise. And that's not the only big change from the last two games in the series. The new game is putting all its chips on multiplayer, foregoing a single-player campaign in favor of leaning into what DICE does best with huge multiplayer battles. And it's raising its player cap on next-gen consoles and PC, from 64 to 128. DICE gave GameSpot a rundown of a lot of what we can expect from Battlefield 2042 in an early presentation. Although we don't have much footage to work with, so a lot of what you're seeing right now is going to be from previous Battlefield games. Set about 20 years in the future, the new title puts you in the role of a non-patrioted soldier, or NOPAT. NOPATs are people whose countries have collapsed, largely as a result of global turmoil due to climate change. As governments fail and people are displaced, the world sees massive increases in refugees. A lot of those refugees include former soldiers, and you are one of them. At the same time, all the upheaval has triggered an armed, global conflict between the US and Russia, who are both using NOPAT soldiers to fight their wars. So in Battlefield 2042, you fight for one side or the other in theaters all over the world, with the hopes that your side will win and that you'll get a seat at the international table once the dust settles. You're fighting for one side or the other, but there's potential that the NOPATs will work to advance their own agenda. All that to say that while this is a multiplayer-only, live service game, Battlefield 2042 will also have an evolving story, according to DICE. We don't know exactly how that story will unfold, but it will be told, somehow, through the 10 starting operator characters you play in multiplayer. We saw 4 of those operators during our presentation, and DICE says more are coming once the game is out, with the potential to bring more narrative to the game at the same time. Operators are fully voiced, and they're both similar to and different from the Battlefield classes players are used to. The franchise's usual classes still sort of exist, but they're more like categories in which the operators operate. Many operators have unique gadgets and traits that fall into class categories, like support, engineer, recon, and assault. But most weapons and other types of gadgets are no longer class-specific. Casper, a recon character, has a motion sensor that tells him when someone is approaching his position. Meanwhile, Webster is an agile assault character who gets a grappling gun so he can change positions quickly and moves faster while aiming. Maria, a support character, has a pistol that can shoot turrets to heal and revive players at a distance. She can also revive teammates to full health, unlike other players who revive their teammates with only a portion of their health back. Finally, Boris, an engineer, can lay down turrets to help him fight, which also get a bonus if he stays near them. As mentioned, you'll play operators who fit into certain classes and have their own pros and cons, but they're not limited in terms of what guns and explosives they can use, so you're not locked into a particular loadout when you take on a certain class. That should provide players a lot of versatility to adjust their operator to go with their playstyles. There's also a new menu for adjusting your weapon loadouts mid-game, which DICE calls the Plus system. It creates a holographic interface on your gun in the shape of a plus that lets you quickly switch weapon attachments on the fly. So if you're going into a close quarters fight, you can quickly add a close range scope, a suppressor, and an underbarrel shotgun, and then flip to longer range attachments as you head to a different engagement. DICE mostly focused on one part of its multiplayer offering in its presentation, All-Out Warfare, where 2 huge teams fight for a map. This is an evolution of conquest and breakthrough modes in other Battlefield games. Each map is divided into sectors that you're trying to capture, but unlike in past games, each sector can contain multiple objectives to grab before you can start scoring points against the other team. In Conquest, you're trying to take as many sectors as you can, while in Breakthrough, one team attacks to capture sectors while the other team defends them, making every battle a frontline fight. Map sizes vary, but they're generally bigger than what we've seen in other Battlefield games to accommodate the increased player count. But DICE doesn't want you running across huge open fields only to get sniped before you ever see any action. So instead, each map essentially contains a lot of smaller maps, areas where players have to congregate and where you'll find yourself in different kinds of battles. DICE calls this approach clustering, and it's where you'll get some use out of the plus system. One objective area might be close quarters with lots of buildings and interiors. Another might be a wide open space like a stadium. Still another might be best suited for vehicles. The idea is you'll be able to pick what kind of fight you want to get into as you head into the battlefield and adjust your guns to match. You'll also have better options for getting around those larger maps. Every player will have a tablet that lets them call in vehicles wherever they are. So if you're far from the battle, you won't have to hoof it all the way back to the fight. Vehicles get parachuted to the spot where you call them, which means you can potentially drop them on snipers and other opponents, and DICE has tweaked them to be more inviting for squads. You won't be just riding along when you hop into a helicopter or tank, because all vehicles have seats with more to do, like firing extra guns or spotting enemies. The idea is that even when you're not driving a vehicle for your squad, you're still an essential part of the fight. Battlefield 2042 is a multiplayer-focused game, but that doesn't mean you have to play with other people. DICE knows that you don't always want to jump into a sweaty online match, which is why you can also play its multiplayer modes alone with AI bots in place of other players. It will be a good way to learn the maps and the ropes of multiplayer, to jump into a battle that's a bit of a different speed from online play, or to take on a fight that has lower stakes with a group of friends on your squad. DICE also gave a preview of 7 Battlefield 2042 maps, each set in a different place around the globe and sporting a variety of sizes and features. Kaleidoscope is set in a South Korean city center, with skyscrapers flanking a lower area with an information hub teams will fight over. In Manifest in Singapore, you'll fight through a container yard that's essential to American supply lines. The containers funnel players into tight spaces for potential ambushes, but automated cranes also move containers around to reconfigure the battlefield, and there are anchored ships to fight through too. Orbital is a medium-sized map that takes you to French Guiana, where both teams fight over a rocket launch pad and its surrounding structures. The rocket can launch, and it can go very badly. The next map is Discarded, set in India, where teams fight over a rogue nuclear asset. Changing water levels have left a bunch of huge ships beached and rusting, so you'll fight through the hulking wrecks. Renewal is an agriculture research station in Egypt that teams are trying to capture. The entire map is divided by a huge wall. On one side is rich greenery from the farming station, and on the other, open desert. You'll head to Dubai for Hourglass, a huge desert map that includes a skyscraper-filled downtown area, a giant open stadium, and rolling sand dunes between the two where vehicles can have it out. And finally, there's Breakaway, the biggest map in the game at almost 6 kilometers across, set in Antarctica. Players fight for oil and gas on a huge map that includes facilities, open ice fields, and exploding silos. DICE says that many of these maps will feature its Levolution system, where they can change based on destructive elements from players and things happening on them, like a disastrous rocket launch. The developer also showed off severe weather that can totally change maps, like huge sandstorms that massively cut visibility on Hourglass, and enormous tornadoes rampaging through its urban maps that can throw players and vehicles. While most of these details are about the current gen versions of the game, there also will be PlayStation 4 and Xbox One versions. They won't be quite as impressive though. DICE says they'll only support 64-player matches, and the maps will be adjusted to accommodate the lower player count. As mentioned, this new Battlefield will also be a live service game, and DICE says it'll use a Battle Pass system post-launch, with free and paid tracks. The game has 4 seasons planned already, each with a new operator. They'll also add new locations and other new content to the game while advancing the overall narrative. But all new maps will be free. DICE has more to show off for Battlefield, including 2 other brands of multiplayer experience. The first is Hazard Zone, which we only know is a squad-focused experience that DICE says is totally new to Battlefield. We don't know exactly what Hazard Zone is yet, but we know it's not Battle Royale. DICE says there won't be a Battle Royale mode in the game at launch. But more info on both of those experiences is on the way. Battlefield 2042 is set to release on October 22nd for PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, and PC. Tune in to GameSpot for even more Battlefield 2042 coverage, as well as all sorts of new stuff coming in from E3 2021 and Play for All this month. Thanks for watching.